If you feel like you're currently living in a giant game of economic snakes and ladders, then roll the dice and join the club. On Wednesday, there was a small drop in inflation. It's without doubt a positive blip for Australians doing it tough. But before you shout whoopee, remember that at 7%, the number is still way too high. Bringing inflation down isn't difficult though. There's a quick and easy fix. The problem, however, is homeowners with mortgages will suffer even more because interest rates must rise further. In about 48 hours, we'll know for sure if the under siege Reserve Bank has the mettle to tame the inflation beast. But in the meantime, it might be wise to assume the brace position. Chantal Schmidt can barely afford a car, let alone a house. But that doesn't mean she hasn't felt the full force of recent interest rate rises.
My landlord is trying to increase my rent by $350 a week.
The freelance writer has unintentionally become a face for Australia's cost of living crisis.
When I received this email,
after a post of hers on TikTok went viral about her rent being jacked up by a staggering $700 a fortnight.
Essentially, we were told this is not negotiable.
A rental crisis is just one of the many knock-on effects of the soaring inflation in Australia this last year.
That's the situation that we're all in at the moment as renters, is that we're between a rock and a hard place. And when it comes to options, what options do we have?
When you read how big the increase was, what was your reaction?
Surely this can't be legal. That was my immediate reaction.
Chantal was already struggling to make ends meet, but this would tip her over the edge. And at an age where she'd hoped to achieve financial independence, she's now staring down the barrel of the ultimate admission of defeat.
Where do you go?
Where do I go? Might have to look at moving back in with mum in my 30s, which, you know, I love my mum and I want to keep it that way. I guess seeing how many people have been commenting and saying, you know, well, this happened to me, or mine's going up by this much, is just highlighting the power imbalance between tenants and landlords right now, which is really unfortunate.
Whether you rent or own, the financial stress is very real for so many Australians right now. It's a symptom of the cost of living pressures we've all been enduring for months on end. And the problem is, while the high prices may have peaked, they're taking way too long to come back down. You might not like what we're about to tell you, but economists say it's time for Australia to accept some brutal home truths.
There are no easy options here. There's no third option, right? You either have to choose high inflation or high interest rates. That's it.
Australian economist Stephen Hamilton is these days based in the US, which has had even worse inflation than Australia. But America's central bank went hard on interest rates early, which has paid dividends, with inflation now coming down quickly. So, Stephen says, after dilly-dallying, there is only one option left for our Reserve Bank, and it's sure to be an unpopular one: hike interest rates even further.
I would much rather get a short, sharp burst of reasonably high interest rates to get things under control quickly, and then, then reduce interest rates as the economy is sort of back at a reasonable speed limit.
So you think there's going to be pain either way, whether we do this the long way or the short way? Why don't we just get it over with?
Yeah, and in fact, that's what I would have suggested in early 2022, right? The Reserve Bank was after the US, after Canada, after New Zealand, after the Bank of England. They went late, and I thought, well, wouldn't it be better to start raising interest rates quickly, get the economy back down to speed, and then we can ease off the brake. We need to remember, the only thing worse than high interest rates is high inflation. Right? It's very bad. It's something we cannot tolerate. And as hard as it is for people paying mortgages, it's even harder if you've got rampant inflation. So we've got to keep some perspective about it.
But if you think an interest rate rise is unpalatable, wait until you hear just how many hikes this economist thinks Australia needs if it wants to get serious about bringing inflation down.
I'd be very surprised if rates didn't get above 5%.
To get it to the fives, I mean, you're not talking 1 or 2 interest rate rises here. I mean, you're talking 6, 7 more interest rate rises to get inflation under control.
I think that's correct. I think that is about right. There's a reason the US went all the way. They're 1.5 percentage points above Australia. And it's because inflation just wasn't coming down as quickly as they wanted it to. We think it will in Australia. We're kind of crossing our fingers and hoping everything will be fine. That's not a good strategy for sort of macroeconomic policy management. You've actually got to do what you need to do to get the outcome that you want to get.
In an ideal world, our inflation rate would be somewhere between 2 and 3%. But on Wednesday, the latest quarterly figures revealed Australia's consumer price index is still at a worrying 7%. Now, that number is starting to come down, but considering it's taken 10 interest rate hikes to get us to this point, this clearly is a problem that isn't going to be fixed anytime soon. It was around this time last year the price of a single head of lettuce soared to over $10. And while salad is now back on the menu, things are far from predictable. Just ask fresh food provider Stephen Biviano about his tomatoes.
They were something like $25 to $30 a box, where we're anywhere in excess of $50 now.
Stephen has already seen the devastating impacts inflation is having on businesses just like his. His nearest competitor recently went into administration.
We are playing a tightrope all the time in this business, and in any business as well. We've seen a huge fluctuation in spending as well across the board of clients. You've seen high-end, there's it's come down quite a bit. The mum and dad businesses, your local stuff, we've seen a drop in spend as well. Huge downturn at the moment.
So how hard is it to run a business at the moment?
Oh, it's incredibly challenging.
Oh, look, we've been living in the most interesting times to be an economist for my whole generation. So I couldn't ask for a better time to be alive. An amazing time.
On the flip side, for the average consumer, this is
awful, unpredictable, uncertain.
If you want an industry that's booming right now, well, it's a very good time to be an economist. The University of New South Wales' Gigi Foster lives and breathes this stuff and believes we need to strap ourselves in because it's going to be a long road out of this crisis. She says there are signs of sticky inflation, which means high prices will be hanging around for not just months, but years.
When we say sticky prices in general in economics, we mean prices that take a while to budge once they are set, even if there are economic reasons why they should budge. But I think we are in for more high prices and uncertainty before all of this resolves. And I think, unfortunately, it's going to be at least another couple of years before this really gets back to anything like what we saw pre-COVID.
Gigi isn't afraid to tell Australians some uncomfortable truths, like during COVID when she controversially declared lockdowns were doing more harm than good.
No death is okay, but welcome to life. Death is part of life, and we are killing more people by keeping ourselves locked down than we are saving.
Now she's throwing a new grenade. Gigi claims our sluggish economy can partly be blamed on what she perceives as laziness and complacency amongst Australians. She's issuing an urgent call to action. Otherwise, she believes we'll end up in recession.
Get off your lazy, couch and actually do something, and it'll make you feel better, too.
So you think the pathway out of this is to actually just start working a bit harder?
The pathway out is to recognize that we are in a lot of strife at the moment, and it's on everybody's shoulders to try to get us out, even if it wasn't everybody's fault that we got here. Because the government's not going to save us. The government can't save us, even if it wanted to. The bank, the RBA can't save us. The way that economies work their way out of recessions is through hard work and the pulling up by the bootstraps of the individual person on the street, realizing, you know what? I've got to make this happen for myself.
But what if this isn't a case of working harder, but instead working smarter? There are some countries that have completely dodged an inflation crisis that could hold the secret to saving our economy. There's always been a lot to like about Switzerland, starting with those stunning vistas in the Alps that take your breath away. Then there's that world-class chocolate and cheese too. And now it turns out their inflation rate is the stuff of dreams as well, just about the lowest in the Western world at a very enviable 3%. How would you rate the Swiss economy right now?
Oh, I'd say it's in very good shape. I would say in great shape with the exception of the 3% inflation, which is not what they're trying to aim at. I'd say they're trying to move back down between 0 and 2%.
Yes, you heard right. Professor George Sheldon from Switzerland's Basel University is disappointed his country has an inflation rate of 3%. If we hear 3% here, we'd kill for that at the moment.
No, agreed. I mean, move to Switzerland, you'll find out the price of living is also very high.
The grass isn't always greener on the other side, you're saying?
Well, yes and no. Switzerland gets a bad rap as being very boring.
But jokes aside, while Switzerland's inflation rate is higher than years past, it is still much better than most other countries. Here, the secret to stability has been a low-cost electricity market and creating strong niche industries that other nations can't replicate.
Switzerland is very special. We're talking about a country of 9 million. So, I mean, they're very much specialized in high-end products. You know, think of Swiss Army knives, watches, and the like. Take a country like the US or you take Australia, they're much more into a large-scale production. So your business model is totally different.
But living up to the stereotype has almost made your economy kind of bomb-proof.
Oh, indeed.
Rather than look to another country for advice, the professor thinks Australia should look to another era. He believes that the inflation experienced after World War II is the best indicator of how our post-COVID woes will play out. And the painful lesson from then is that it's a very slow road out of this kind of situation.
The fact of the matter is you have to start up an economy again. It's very similar historically to after the Second World War, where the entire production was geared to armaments. And then after the war, people wanted cars. The inflation rate in the US went up over 10% due to the structural readjustment and lasted 2 to 3 years. So what I'm basically saying is people don't realize it takes time.
So essentially, unless people are happy to cop sky-high interest rates, this is going to take a while to fix.
It takes time to lower inflation unless you want to, throw people out of jobs. That's a fact. You can slam on the brakes, but you're going to have high unemployment.
What sort of people are you seeing coming through the door lately?
Back in Australia, Liberal Senator Jane Hume is trying to do the impossible and solve the cost of living crisis.
What's really distressing is seeing people who are working people who have jobs coming in.
Price new customers.
She's chairing a Senate committee that's travelling across the country, hearing from people hit hardest by soaring prices.
Australians are telling us that this is the number one issue that they want addressed, and they're looking to their government for answers. It's a difficult problem, but it's not an impossible problem.
What happens if we don't get this right?
We can't afford to not get this right. Inflation is a thief in the night. It undermines our standard of living. Small businesses are feeling the pressure of the cost of living just as households are.
With the federal budget just around the corner, the opposition senator, who used to work for NAB and Deutsche Bank, warns that the government needs to tighten its belt.
Unless the government tackles the cost of living crisis, well, they're simply leaving those people to their own devices, and it will be a very grim winter for thousands of Australians.
Economist Stephen Hamilton agrees that the time for tiptoeing around the issue of inflation is long gone. The University of George Washington professor believes the Reserve Bank must raise interest rates on Tuesday, and then the Treasurer needs to slash spending in the May budget.
when you have this inflationary environment, the calls for help, right, are so loud. Everyone is asking for support. The trouble is, if you provide that support, it's counterproductive, right? The more money the government hands to people, the more money is in their pocket to go out and spend, the more demand in the economy.
Often come the budget, the Treasurer wants to be the Pied Piper, just splashing cash everywhere. You're saying this is not the year for that.
What we need from the Treasurer in this budget is an incredible degree of restraint to help as much as he can to get inflation back down to the target as quickly as possible. Maybe some targeted relief for people, right? Particularly on very low incomes. Rent assistance with very high rents. I think those kinds of things would be acceptable. But broad-based relief would make the situation worse. And the trouble people are facing with high inflation and high interest rates would only get worse if he were to do that.
Any help paying the bills would certainly be welcomed by Chantel Schmidt after her rent was increased by an eye-watering $700 a fortnight. She and her housemates are taking the issue to the Tenancy Tribunal next month. But if it can't help, then the freelance writer will be forced to move out and become yet another victim of our out-of-control inflation.
Australians talk about a fair go. Is this fair?
I know that everyone's feeling the pinch of inflation, but I think that there are people that are taking advantage and there are people that are taking the piss, and we need to be better people to each other.
Hello, I'm Tom Steinfort. Thank you for watching 60 Minutes Australia. Subscribe to our channel now for brand new stories and exclusive clips every week. And don't miss out on our extra minutes segments and full episodes of 60 Minutes, which are on 9now.com.au and the 9Now app.